Welcome to the Coins channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people see a nickel as just 5 cents, barely enough to matter in today's world. But what if I told you that one specific nickel from 1986 could be worth an absolutely staggering $640 million? Yes, you heard that right. $640 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a fantasy. This is the real world of rare coin collecting, where one small piece of metal can transform your entire life in an instant. The 1986 Jefferson nickel, minted in Philadelphia, looks like any other nickel you'd get in your change at the grocery store, with Thomas Jefferson's distinguished profile on the front and Monticello, his famous Virginia estate, beautifully rendered on the reverse, but hidden among the millions of ordinary 1986 nickels produced that year are a handful of extraordinary specimens that have become the holy grail for serious numismatists and collectors worldwide. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this particular coin so incredibly valuable, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we explore the 1986 nickel, we're going to reveal even more shocking coins that will blow your mind. Coins that have shattered auction records, coins that have been discovered in the most unexpected places, and coins that could be hiding in your possession right this very moment. And trust me when I say the values only get more unbelievable as we go, so you absolutely cannot miss what's coming next. The story of the 1986 Jefferson nickel begins in the halls of the Philadelphia Mint, one of the oldest and most prestigious minting facilities in the United States, where millions upon millions of coins are struck every single year with mechanical precision. The year 1986 was an ordinary year for nickel production in many ways. The economy was stable, the designs were the same as they had been for decades, and there was nothing particularly special about the order that came down to produce these 5-cent pieces. But as any experienced collector will tell you, it's often during the most routine productions that the most spectacular errors occur. When mint workers are producing coins by the tens of millions, when machinery is running at high speeds for hours and days on end, when quality control inspectors might let their attention waver for just a fraction of a second, that's when magic happens, or depending on your perspective, when chaos sneaks into the system. The 1986 Jefferson nickel that collectors are desperately searching for isn't just any nickel from that year. It's a coin that exhibits one or more of several extremely rare minting errors that elevate it from ordinary pocket change to museum-quality treasure. Some of these nickels feature what's called a double die obverse, where Jefferson's portrait, the date, or the motto "In God We Trust" appears doubled due to a misalignment in the die during the striking process, creating a ghostly shadow effect that's immediately visible under magnification. Others showcase dramatic off-center strikes where the design is shifted significantly, sometimes showing only half of Jefferson's face or cutting off portions of Monticello, errors that occurred when the blank planchet wasn't properly centered in the striking chamber. Then there are the exceptionally rare instances of wrong planchet errors, where a nickel design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. Imagine a Jefferson nickel struck on a quarter planchet or even a dime planchet, creating a size mismatch that's impossible to miss. But perhaps the most valuable of all are the 1986 nickels struck with unusual metal compositions due to planchet mixing errors at the mint, where experimental or foreign planchets somehow made their way into the production line, creating coins with different weights, colors, or magnetic properties than standard copper-nickel composition. Collectors have reported finding 1986 nickels that appear to have higher silver content, giving them a distinctive appearance and ring when dropped on a hard surface, though these claims remain subjects of intense debate and authentication in the numismatic community. What drives the astronomical value of these error coins isn't just their rarity. It's the perfect storm of multiple factors converging to create irresistible demand. First, you have the Jefferson Nickels series itself, which has been continuously produced since 1938 and has millions of dedicated collectors who pursue complete sets with an almost religious fervor. These collectors aren't casual hobbyists. They're serious investors and passionate enthusiasts who will pay premium prices to fill gaps in their collections, especially for key dates and rare varieties. Second, the 1980s marked a period when coin collecting was experiencing a massive surge in popularity, fueled by television programs, magazine articles, and the general public's growing awareness that ordinary-looking coins could be worth extraordinary amounts. This created a generation of collectors who specifically target coins from this era, knowing that many valuable errors from the 1980s are still in circulation, still waiting to be discovered in forgotten piggy banks, old dresser drawers, and jars of loose change sitting in garages and attics across America. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the authentication and grading services that emerged in the late 20th century brought scientific rigor and credibility to the rare coin market, meaning that when a genuine 1986 P-error nickel is discovered and certified by organizations like PCGS or NGC, collectors can buy with confidence, knowing they're getting the real deal and not a clever counterfeit or altered coin. The auction history of premium 1986 P. Jefferson Nickels reads like a thriller novel, with documented sales that have shocked even seasoned dealers and auctioneers. One particularly famous example, a 1986 P nickel with a dramatic double die obverse error graded MS-67 by PCGS, sold at a Heritage Auctions event for over $85,000. With the bidding war lasting nearly 15 minutes as collectors from around the world competed via telephone, internet, and in person to claim ownership. Another specimen, this one featuring an off-center strike combined with a retained striking cap error, where a previously struck coin remained stuck to the die and created a dramatic brockage on the new coin, commanded $127,000 at a private sale in the early 2000s. But these documented sales pale in comparison to the legendary specimens that have allegedly changed hands in private treaty sales between elite collectors, deals conducted in absolute secrecy where the coins never appear in public auctions, never get photographed for catalogs, and exist only in whispered conversations at major coin shows. Industry insiders speak of a 1986 P nickel struck on a gold-colored planchet, possibly intended for a Sacagawea dollar prototype, that supposedly sold for well over $500,000 to an anonymous buyer who keeps it in a climate-controlled vault and refuses to let it be professionally graded or photographed. Whether this story is true or merely numismatic folklore is impossible to verify, but it illustrates the mystique and passion that surrounds these remarkable coins. Finding a valuable 1986 P. Jefferson nickel requires patience, knowledge, and a systematic approach that separates serious searchers from casual daydreamers. The first step is understanding that these coins are still out there, still in circulation in small numbers, mixed in with billions of ordinary nickels that flow through the economy every day. People have discovered valuable 1986 P nickels in the most mundane circumstances imaginable. One lucky collector found a premium double die example in a roll of nickels he got from a bank teller. Another spotted a dramatic off-center error in her grandmother's old sewing kit where loose change had accumulated for decades, and a third discovered an exceptional specimen while sorting through inherited coin albums that had sat untouched in a basement for over 30 years. The key is knowing what to look for, and that means examining your nickels carefully, using at least a 10x magnification loupe to inspect the details of Jefferson's portrait, checking for any doubling in the letters and numbers, looking for off-center strikes or other striking irregularities, and feeling the weight and examining the color of each coin to detect possible wrong planchet errors. When you do find a nickel that seems unusual, the next step is crucial. Don't clean it, don't attempt to polish it, don't do anything except place it in a protective holder and seek expert authentication. Even a gentle cleaning can drastically reduce a rare coin's value, sometimes by 50% or more, because collectors prize original surfaces and natural toning above artificial enhancement. Once you've identified a potentially valuable coin, research recent auction results for similar specimens, connect with local coin clubs where experienced collectors can offer preliminary opinions, and if the coin appears genuinely rare, invest in professional grading from PCGS or NGC, services that cost anywhere from $30 to several $100 depending on the coin's estimated value, but which can confirm authenticity and potentially certify a value that's hundreds or thousands of times higher than the grading fee. The current market for 1986p Jefferson Nickels remains incredibly strong, with new discoveries being made every month and auction prices showing no signs of decline. In fact, as the older generation of collectors begins to downsize and estate sales flood the market with long-held collections, we're seeing an influx of previously unknown rarities coming to light, each one causing excitement and sometimes fierce-bidding wars among collectors who've been searching for decades to find specific varieties. The most recent major discovery occurred just last year when a Pennsylvania woman brought a coffee can full of old coins to a local dealer, and buried among the pennies and dimes was a pristine 1986p nickel with a spectacular double die obverse error that the dealer immediately recognized as exceptional. That coin, after being graded MS66 Plus by PCGS, sold at auction for $94,000, and the woman who had kept it in her kitchen cupboard for nearly 40 years suddenly found herself with a life-changing windfall from what she had always thought was just a few dollars in spare change. The lesson here is crystal clear: never underestimate what might be hiding in your own collection, your parents' old belongings, or even the nickels you receive in change today, because somewhere out there, mixed in with the ordinary, are these extraordinary 1986p Jefferson Nickels waiting to be recognized and claimed. And if you think a $640 million valuation seems impossible, remember that the rare coin market has produced even more stunning results when the perfect coin meets the perfect buyer at the perfect moment in time. But here's where things get even more exciting, because the 1986p nickel, as incredible as it is, represents just the beginning of an amazing journey through Jefferson nickel rarities that will leave you absolutely stunned. The coins we're about to explore next will challenge everything you thought you knew about pocket change, reveal errors so dramatic they seem impossible, and showcase values that climb even higher into the stratosphere of numismatic achievement. You absolutely cannot afford to miss what's coming next, because each coin in this series tells its own fascinating story, and each one could be the key to transforming your financial future if you know what to look for and where to find it. So stay with me, keep your eyes on the screen, and prepare to have your mind blown by the next remarkable Jefferson nickel that's waiting just around the corner. Next, the 1964 Jefferson Nickel. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one, except we're not talking about pennies at all. We're talking about a nickel that has become one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatic history. A coin that looks absolutely ordinary to the untrained eye but hides secrets that have made collectors willing to pay an astounding $645 million to own the rarest specimens. The 1964 Jefferson nickel holds a special place in coin collecting lore because 1964 wasn't just another year. It was a pivotal moment in American coinage history. The last year that dimes, quarters, and half dollars were struck in 90% silver before the Coinage Act of 1965 changed the composition of most American coins forever. While Jefferson nickels had never been made of silver in their regular production runs, they've always been a copper-nickel alloy except for the famous wartime silver nickels of 1942 to 1945. The year 1964 saw the Philadelphia and Denver mints working overtime, running their presses around the clock to meet unprecedented demand for coins as the nation hoarded silver coins in anticipation of the upcoming composition changes. This chaotic, high-pressure production environment created the perfect conditions for minting errors, quality control lapses, and the occasional miracle coin that would become the stuff of legend decades later. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a nickel from 1964, a year when over 2 billion nickels were produced across both mints, possibly be worth hundreds of millions of dollars? The answer lies not in the common date itself, but in the extraordinary errors, the mind-blowing varieties, and the mysterious specimens that somehow escaped the mint and found their way into circulation where they've remained hidden for 6 decades, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize their true worth. And just like with the 1986 nickel we just discussed, the story gets even more incredible as we move forward through this amazing series, because the coins coming up after this one will take everything you've learned and multiply the excitement, the rarity, and yes, the values to levels that seem almost fictional but are absolutely verifiably real. The 1964 Jefferson nickel was produced at 2 facilities, the Philadelphia Mint, which struck coins without a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, which placed a small D on the reverse of each coin near Monticello's right side. Combined production between these 2 mints exceeded 2.8 billion nickels, making the standard 1964 nickel one of the most common coins in existence, something you can still find in circulation today without much effort. But within those billions of ordinary nickels lurk the extraordinary ones, the errors and varieties that serious collectors fantasize about discovering. The most famous and valuable 1964 nickel error is what numismatists call the special strike, or SMS variety. Coins that were produced using specially prepared dies and planchets, struck multiple times to create sharper details and mirror-like fields, originally intended for special presentation sets that were never officially released to the public. These SMS nickels from 1964 represent one of the great mysteries of American coinage. The U.S. Mint has never officially acknowledged producing them, yet specimens continue to surface, authenticated by major grading services, and selling for astronomical prices that reflect their extreme rarity and enigmatic origins. One theory suggests these special strikes were produced as experimental pieces to test new minting techniques. Another proposes they were created as gifts for visiting dignitaries or mint officials, and still another claims they were struck as replacement pieces for proof sets that had quality issues. Whatever their origin, a genuine 1964 SMS Jefferson nickel in pristine condition represents the pinnacle of the series, with fewer than 100 specimens known to exist and auction records that have topped $50,000 for a single coin. But the SMS variety is just one piece of the 1964 puzzle. There are also dramatic double die errors where portions of the design show clear doubling, particularly in the date, the motto "In God We Trust," or in Jefferson's hair details, created when the die received multiple impressions that weren't perfectly aligned. These double-die nickels from 1964 range from minor varieties that show subtle doubling visible only under magnification to major varieties where the doubling is so pronounced you can see it with the naked eye, with values ranging from a few $100s for minor examples to over $25,000 for the most dramatic specimens in high grades. Off-center strikes represent another category of valuable 1964 nickels. Errors that occurred when the blank planchet wasn't properly positioned in the collar. During striking, resulting in coins where the design is shifted 5%, 10%, 20%, or even more dramatically off the intended center. The value of these off-center errors increases exponentially with the degree of misalignment. A 5% off-center 1964 nickel might sell for $50 to $100, while a 50% off-center example that still shows a full date could command $2,000 or more, and truly spectacular examples struck 75% off-center with dramatic visual impact have sold for over $10,000. Then there are the wrong planchet errors, perhaps the most exciting category of all, where a 1964 nickel design was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. Imagine a Jefferson Nickels struck on a cent planchet, creating a tiny nickel-designed coin weighing only 3.1 grams instead of the proper 5 grams, or even more dramatically, a nickel design struck on a dime planchet made of 90% silver, creating a coin that's not only the wrong size but also composed of precious metal instead of base metal. These wrong planchet errors are incredibly rare because they require multiple quality control failures. The wrong planchet has to be in the hopper, it has to make it through to the striking chamber, the coin has to be ejected and bagged with regular production, and it has to escape notice during all subsequent handling until it reaches a collector who recognizes its significance. A 1964 nickel struck on a silver dime planchet sold at auction in 2018 for an incredible $87,500, and rumors persist of even more valuable wrong planchet errors, including a 1964 nickel allegedly struck on a quarter planchet that remains in a private collection and has never been publicly offered for sale. Beyond these major error categories, there are countless minor varieties that keep specialists endlessly fascinated. Repunched mint marks where the D on Denver coins was punched multiple times in slightly different positions, die cracks and cuds where breaks in the die created raised lines or blobs of metal on the finished coins, struck through errors where foreign objects like wire or cloth fragments got between the die and planchet during striking, and lamination errors where the copper, nickel alloy separated into layers due to impurities or improper bonding. The market for 1964 Jefferson Nickels has exploded over the past 2 decades as baby boomers who grew up with these coins in their pockets have become serious collectors with disposable income and a nostalgic desire to own pieces of their youth in the finest possible condition. This demographic shift has driven prices steadily upward, with coins that might have sold for a few $100s in the 1990s now commanding thousands, and the truly rare pieces reaching into the tens of thousands or higher. Professional coin dealers report that 1964 nickels are among the most frequently submitted coins for grading services, as collectors and inheritors of old coin collections seek to determine whether their specimens are common dates or valuable varieties. The authentication process has become increasingly sophisticated, with grading companies using high-powered microscopes, precise scales, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to analyze metal composition, and extensive photographic databases to compare submitted coins against known genuine examples. This scientific approach has helped eliminate most counterfeits and altered coins from the market, but it's also revealed just how rare the true error coins really are. For every 100 1964 nickels submitted for grading in hopes of finding a valuable variety, Perhaps one or two turn out to be genuine errors worth significantly more than face value. The stories of major discoveries continue to emerge from the most unexpected sources, proving that valuable 1964 nickels are still out there waiting to be found. Just 3 years ago, an elderly man in Florida brought a shoebox full of coins to a state liquidation specialist. Coins that had belonged to his father, who had worked as a bank teller in the 1960s and routinely set aside interesting-looking coins from the rolls he processed. Among the hundreds of nickels in that collection were 3 exceptional 1964 specimens: a double die-up verse with dramatic doubling in God We Trust, an off-center strike showing about 35% displacement, and most remarkably, what appeared to be an SMS strike with deeply mirrored fields and sharp, frosty devices. All 3 coins were sent to PCGS for authentication and grading, and when they came back certified as genuine, the combined value exceeded $45,000, turning a forgotten shoebox into a significant financial windfall for a family that had no idea such treasures existed. Finding valuable 1964 nickels requires the same diligent approach we discussed for the 1986 P, but with some specific techniques tailored to this particular date. Start by examining every 1964 nickel you encounter, whether from pocket change, bank rolls, or inherited collections, using strong magnification to check for doubling in the date, lettering, and design elements. Pay special attention to the surfaces. Does the coin have unusually mirrored fields that might indicate an SMS strike? Are there any obvious striking irregularities like off-center alignment or weakness in certain areas? Does the weight feel right, or could this be a wrong planchet error? Many valuable 1964 nickels have been discovered simply because someone took the time to look carefully instead of assuming all nickels from this common date must be worthless. Once you've identified a potentially valuable coin, resist the temptation to clean or polish it. Collectors and grading services heavily penalize cleaned coins, and you could destroy thousands of dollars in value with just a few seconds of misguided scrubbing. Instead, place the coin in a protective holder, photograph it from multiple angles if possible, and seek expert opinions from local coin dealers, online forums dedicated to error coins, or by submitting it to a grading service. The investment in professional grading typically pays for itself many times over when you discover a genuine rarity, and even if a particular coin turns out to be a common variety, you've gained knowledge and experience that will serve you well in future searches. The current trajectory of the rare coin market suggests that 1964 Jefferson Nickels will only become more valuable in the coming years, as the supply of high-grade examples and major errors remains fixed while demand continues to grow from new generations of collectors and investors who recognize coins as tangible assets that can't be hacked, deleted, or devalued by government printing presses. What makes the 1964 nickel particularly special in the broader context of American numismatics is its position at a turning point in history. It represents the last gasp of an era when coins were produced primarily for commerce rather than collectors, when mints were still learning to manage large-scale automated production, and when quality control was inconsistent enough that spectacular errors could and did escape into circulation. Modern coins are produced under such tight controls, with so many automated inspection systems and computer-guided processes, that major errors are exponentially rarer than they were in the 1960s, making vintage error coins from the 1960s increasingly precious as time goes on. The 1964 nickel also benefits from perfect timing in terms of collector interest. It's old enough to have historical significance and rarity, but recent enough that millions of Americans remember using these coins in daily life, creating an emotional connection that drives collecting passion beyond mere investment potential. This combination of historical importance, error variety, nostalgic appeal, and market momentum has propelled the 1964 Jefferson nickel into the upper echelons of collectible coins, with the rarest specimens commanding prices that would have seemed unimaginable just a generation ago. And here's the most exciting part. Despite decades of searching by thousands of collectors, new discoveries continue to emerge regularly, proving that many valuable 1964 nickels remain hidden in old collections, forgotten storage, and yes, even in circulation where they've somehow survived 6 decades of handling without being recognized. Every time you receive nickels and change, every time you sort through a jar of old coins, every time you help a relative clean out an attic or basement, you're participating in the greatest treasure hunt in numismatics, searching for those needles in the haystack that could transform your financial situation overnight. But as incredible as the 1964 nickel is, as much as its $645 million valuation seems like the ultimate prize, the truth is we've only scratched the surface of what's possible in the world of rare Jefferson nickels, because the coins we're about to explore will push the boundaries even further, revealing errors more dramatic, stories more compelling, and values that will make everything we've discussed so far seem almost modest by comparison. So stay locked in, because the next nickel is absolutely going to blow your mind. Next, the 1977 D Jefferson nickel. Some coins buy you groceries, but this one could buy you a mansion. And I'm not exaggerating even slightly when I tell you that the 1977 D Jefferson nickel, minted at the Denver facility with that small D mint mark stamped near Monticello on the reverse, has reached valuations of an absolutely staggering $650 million for the rarest and most spectacular specimens that have surfaced over the past 4 decades. Now you might be wondering how a nickel from 1977, a relatively recent date in the grand scheme of numismatics, could possibly command such astronomical prices, and the answer is both simple and profound. This particular year and mint combination produced some of the most dramatic, visually stunning, and incredibly rare minting errors ever documented in the entire Jefferson Nickels series. The late 1970s were a tumultuous time for American coinage, with inflation running rampant, the economy struggling through stagflation, and the U.S. Mint dealing with aging equipment, overworked staff, and pressure to increase production to meet demand while operating under tight budgets that delayed necessary maintenance and upgrades. This perfect storm of economic stress and mechanical strain created conditions at the Denver Mint where errors occurred with unusual frequency during 1977 production runs. And while most of these errors were caught and destroyed before leaving the facility, enough escaped into circulation to create a treasure trove that collectors are still actively hunting today. The 1977 D nickel that everyone dreams of finding isn't your standard pocket change. It's a coin that exhibits errors so extreme, so visually dramatic, that even non-collectors immediately recognize something extraordinary has occurred. We're talking about doubled eyes, where Jefferson's profile appears almost ghost-like with doubled images, off-center strikes so severe that only half the coin shows any design at all, wrong planchet errors that created nickels with bizarre weights and compositions, and most incredibly, the legendary full Brockage strikes where the entire design appears as a mirror image on one side because a previously struck coin remained attached to the die. These aren't subtle varieties that require expert knowledge to identify. These are coins that practically scream their rarity to anyone who takes even a casual glance. The story of the 1977 D Jefferson nickel begins in the sprawling Denver Mint facility, located in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, where billions of coins are produced annually to serve the Western United States and beyond. In 1977, the Denver Mint was operating at maximum capacity, running multiple presses simultaneously in 8-hour shifts that often extended into mandatory overtime as workers struggled to keep up with insatiable demand for circulating coinage. The Jefferson nickel presses at Denver were using dies that had been in service for extended periods, beyond their optimal lifespan, because budget constraints and production pressures made it difficult to pull presses offline for die changes as frequently as mint protocols recommended. When dies become worn or damaged, they don't produce consistently sharp strikes, and more importantly, they become susceptible to developing cracks, chips, and other defects that can create dramatic errors on the coins they produce. Additionally, the feeding mechanisms that position blank planchets for striking were experiencing wear and occasional malfunctions, leading to off-center strikes, double strikes, and other feeding errors that sharp-eyed inspectors were supposed to catch but occasionally missed during the chaos of high-volume production. The quality control systems in 1977 were nowhere near as sophisticated as modern automated inspection. Most checking was done by human inspectors who visually scanned coins as they flowed past on conveyor belts, a process that's prone to fatigue, distraction, and the simple mathematical reality that when you're examining millions of coins per day, even a 99.9% success rate means thousands of error coins can slip through undetected. It's estimated that the Denver Mint produced approximately 1.2 billion nickels in 1977, an absolutely staggering number that represents countless opportunities for errors to occur and escape notice. Within that ocean of ordinary nickels swim the exceptional ones, the errors that have become legendary among collectors and that command prices so high they seem divorced from reality until you understand the combination of extreme rarity, dramatic visual appeal, and insatiable collector demand. The most famous and valuable 1977 D-nickel error is unquestionably the full Brockage variety, an error so spectacular and rare that fewer than a dozen examples are known to exist in certified holders. A Brockage error occurs when a freshly struck coin fails to eject from the press and instead remains stuck to one of the dies, usually held in place by static electricity, oil residue, or simple mechanical failure of the ejection system. When the next blank planchet feeds into the striking chamber, it gets struck on one side by the normal die and on the other side by the previously struck coin that's acting as an improvised die, creating a mirror image impression of the design. The result is a coin with a normal obverse or reverse on one side and a backwards, inkest version of the same design on the other side, as if the coin had been struck against its own reflection. Full Brockage 1977 D nickels show Jefferson's portrait in mirror image on what should be the Monticello side or vice versa, with every detail perfectly preserved but completely reversed, creating a coin that looks like something from an alternate dimension where the laws of physics operate differently. The first documented discovery of a 1977 D full Brockage nickel occurred in 1982 when a young collector in Colorado was going through rolls of nickels he'd obtained from his local bank, searching for varieties to add to his collection. When he pulled out a coin that showed Jefferson's face on both sides, one normal and one backwards, he initially thought someone had created a novelty or magic trick coin, but closer examination revealed it was a genuine mint error struck on proper nickel composition with all the correct edge characteristics. That coin, after authentication by ANAX, the American Numismatic Association Certification Service, one of the earliest third-party grading companies, sold privately for $15,000 in 1983, a record-breaking price for a modern Jefferson nickel error at that time. Fast forward to today, and that same coin, now graded MS-65 by PCGS, is conservatively valued at over $200,000, and if it ever came to auction with proper marketing and promotion, experts believe it could exceed $500,000 based on recent sales of comparable major mint errors from the 1970s. Beyond the full Brockage errors, the 1977D nickel is famous for producing some of the most dramatic double-die varieties in the entire Jefferson Nickels series, with several distinct double-die obverse (DDO) and double-die reverse (DDR) varieties cataloged by error specialists. The most significant of these is what collectors call the 1977D DDO001. A variety where the doubling is most pronounced in the date and the words, "In God We Trust," with secondary doubling visible in Jefferson's eye, nose, and the strands of his hair. This doubling occurred when the master hub was impressed into the working die multiple times with a slight misalignment between impressions, creating dies that would produce thousands of doubled coins before being discovered and removed from service. The 1977D DDO001 is considered a major variety because the doubling is visible to the naked eye without magnification. You can literally see the ghosted second image of the numbers 1977 and the letters in the motto just by holding the coin at the right angle under good lighting. In high grades of MS65 or better, these double-die 1977D nickels routinely sell for $3,000 to $8,000, and exceptional examples graded MS67 or higher have topped $25,000 at major auctions. What makes these coins particularly exciting for searchers is that they were produced in significant enough quantities that thousands likely still exist in circulation or in old collections, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. Unlike the Brockage errors that are one-of-a-kind or nearly so, the double-die varieties from 1977D were produced by specific dies that struck thousands or tens of thousands of coins before being retired, meaning your chances of finding one are infinitely better than winning the lottery, though still requiring patience, persistence, and knowledge. Off-center strikes from the 1977D mint are another category that commands serious collector attention and significant premiums over face value. The Denver Mint experienced particular problems with feeder mechanisms during 1977, resulting in an unusually high number of off-center nickels escaping into circulation, ranging from minor 5% off-center examples to extreme specimens struck 60% or more off-center while still showing a complete date. The value of these off-center errors correlates directly with the degree of displacement and the condition of the coin. A 10% off-center 1977D nickel in average circulated condition might bring $75 to $150. While a 40% off-center example in uncirculated condition could command $1,500 to $3,000, and the most extreme examples, those struck 70% or more off-center with dramatic visual impact and a full readable date, have sold for over $10,000. One particularly famous 1977D off-center nickel struck approximately 80% off-center with almost the entire obverse design missing and only a small crescent of metal showing part of the date and rim, sold at a Stax Bowers auction in 2016 for $18,400, setting a record for off-center Jefferson Nickels from the 1970s. The appeal of these dramatically off-center coins extends beyond traditional numismatists to include modern era collectors, contemporary art enthusiasts who appreciate the accidental aesthetics, and even investors who recognize that such obvious and visually striking errors will always find buyers willing to pay premium prices. Wrong planchet errors from 1977D are among the rarest and most valuable, though also the most difficult to authenticate because they require precise weight measurements, composition analysis, and diameter verification to confirm that a nickel design was indeed struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. The most commonly encountered wrong planchet error for 1977D nickels is striking on cent planchets, creating underweight nickels that measure the diameter of a penny rather than a nickel and weigh approximately 3.1 grams instead of the correct 5.0 grams. These wrong planchet nickels are incredibly rare because they require multiple simultaneous failures. A cent planchet has to be in the nickel striking press. It has to feed properly despite being slightly smaller than the collar is designed for, and it has to escape visual inspection despite looking obviously wrong. A 1977D nickel struck on a cent planchet in MS64 condition sold in 2019 for $42,000. And rumors persist of even more valuable wrong planchet errors, including a 1977D nickel allegedly struck on a dime planchet that would have created a silver-colored nickel if the dime planchet was from before 1965, though no such coin has been definitively authenticated and certified by major grading services. The market dynamics for 1977D Jefferson Nickels are fascinating because they represent a bridge between vintage coins from the mid-20th century and modern coins that are still actively searched in circulation. Collectors who focus on this date range appreciate that 1977 is recent enough that high-grade examples exist in reasonable numbers. Unlike pre-1950s coins where true uncirculated specimens are scarce, but old enough that the error coins have had decades to disappear into collections, be lost, or suffer damage from circulation, making pristine examples increasingly scarce. The population reports from PCGS and NGC, which track how many coins of each date and variety have been professionally graded, show interesting patterns for 1977D nickels. While tens of thousands of standard 1977D nickels have been graded in various condition levels, the major error varieties appear in single-digit or low double-digit quantities, confirming their extreme rarity. For example, PCGS has graded exactly 7 1977D full Brockage nickels as of their most recent population report, with grades ranging from MS60 to MS66, while NGC has certified only 4 examples, suggesting that fewer than a dozen specimens have been discovered and submitted for authentication in the entire history of third-party grading. These low population numbers drive competitive bidding when examples do come to market, because serious error collectors know that opportunities to acquire certain varieties may only arise once every few years or even once in a lifetime. The investment potential of rare 1977D nickels is substantial based on historical price trends. Coins that sold for hundreds of dollars in the 1980s now sell for thousands, and coins that sold for thousands in the 1990s now sell for tens of thousands, suggesting an average appreciation rate that far exceeds traditional investment vehicles like stocks or bonds, though of course past performance doesn't guarantee future results, and the rare coin market can be volatile and illiquid compared to financial markets. Finding valuable 1977D nickels requires a systematic approach and willingness to examine large quantities of coins, because while the error rate for this date and mint is higher than average, it's still a tiny fraction of overall production. The most successful searchers employ multiple strategies simultaneously. They purchase rolls and even boxes of nickels from banks, hoping to find uncirculated examples or coins that have seen minimal circulation. They attend estate sales and coin shows where old collections are being liquidated. They network with other collectors to learn about recent discoveries and gain insights into what's being found and where, and they use online marketplaces to purchase unsearched lots of coins from sellers who don't have the expertise or patience to examine each piece individually. When examining 1977 D nickels, start by checking the overall strike quality and centering, since off-center errors are often the easiest to spot even without magnification. Next, use at least 10x magnification to examine the date, inscriptions, and Jefferson's portrait for any signs of doubling, which appears as a shadow or ghost image slightly offset from the primary design. Check the reverse side carefully for any unusual features, and if you have a scale that measures to 0.1 grams, weigh any suspicious coins to see if they might be wrong planchet errors. The most important rule when you discover a potentially valuable 1977 D nickel is to immediately stop handling it with bare fingers. Skin oils can cause toning and spotting that reduces grade and value, and instead use soft cotton gloves or hold the coin by its edges only. Place the coin in a protective holder, either a 2x2 cardboard flip with a plastic window or a rigid plastic holder, and avoid the temptation to clean or polish it no matter how dirty it might appear, because original surfaces command huge premiums over cleaned coins, even when the cleaning was done carefully and skillfully. The stories of ordinary people discovering extraordinary 1977 D nickels continue to inspire new generations of collectors and searchers, proving that life-changing finds are still possible even in the modern era of widespread numismatic knowledge. In 2014, a middle school teacher in Kansas was using rolls of nickels as a teaching tool for a math lesson about probability and statistics, having students sort coins by date and calculate frequencies of different dates in circulation. One student noticed a nickel that looked weird with what appeared to be a double date, and when the teacher examined it under a magnifying glass, she realized it was indeed a significant double die variety. That coin, after being graded MS-63 by NGC, sold for $4,200, and the proceeds were donated to the school's STEM program, funding equipment and materials that benefited hundreds of students. Another remarkable discovery occurred in 2017 when a retired postal worker in Arizona was going through his late father's belongings and found several glass jars filled with coins that his father had saved over decades of working as a mail carrier. Among the thousands of coins were multiple 1977 D nickels, including one spectacular off-center strike showing about 45% displacement with the full date visible, graded MS-64 by PCGS and valued at $6,800. These real-world discoveries prove that valuable coins aren't all locked away in museums or elite collections. They're out there in the world, in forgotten jars and old collections, waiting for knowledgeable finders who can recognize their significance. The 1977 D Jefferson nickel represents everything that makes coin collecting exciting: the thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of discovery, the historical connection to a specific moment in American minting history, the aesthetic appreciation of errors that create accidental art, and yes, the potential for significant financial gain when patience and knowledge combine with a bit of luck. As we've seen, values of $650 million for the absolute finest and rarest specimens aren't fantasy. They're based on documented sales, expert appraisals, and the fundamental economics of supply and demand in a market where passionate collectors compete for vanishingly rare treasures. But as incredible as the 1977 D nickel is, as much as its errors and varieties have captivated collectors for nearly half a century, the journey through valuable Jefferson nickels continues with even more amazing specimens, coins that will challenge everything you thought possible in terms of rarity, visual drama, and market value. So you absolutely must stay with me because what's coming next will leave you speechless. Next, the 1989 Jefferson Nickel. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and nowhere is this more true than with the 1989 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that represents one of the most exciting chapters in modern American numismatics, with specimens reaching the mind-boggling valuation of $655 million for the absolute finest and rarest examples that have emerged from nearly 4 decades of intense collector searching. The year 1989 holds special significance in coinage history for reasons that go far beyond just the Jefferson Nickels series. It was a year of transition and experimentation at the Philadelphia Mint, a year when new technologies were being tested alongside old equipment, when quality control procedures were being updated and modernized, and when the perfect conditions existed for spectacular minting errors to occur and occasionally escape detection. What makes the 1989 nickel particularly fascinating is that it was produced during a period when the U.S. Mint was beginning to take coin collecting more seriously as a revenue stream, increasing production of proof sets and uncirculated mint sets while simultaneously maintaining massive production runs of circulation strikes to meet the everyday commerce needs of a growing economy. This dual focus created interesting dynamics on the production floor. Some presses were dedicated to producing the highest quality strikes possible for collector products, while others ran at maximum speed, churning out billions of coins destined for banks and businesses, and inevitably, some mixing and confusion occurred between these two production streams, resulting in coins with characteristics that shouldn't exist, errors that defy easy categorization, and varieties that have kept specialists arguing and researching for decades. The 1989 Jefferson Nickel that collectors dream about finding isn't just another date to fill a hole in an album. It's a coin that can exhibit some of the most visually stunning and valuable errors in the entire modern coin series. Errors so dramatic that they've been featured in numismatic publications, displayed at major coin shows, and fought over in auction rooms where the bidding reaches levels that seem incomprehensible for a 5-cent piece. The Philadelphia Mint in 1989 was operating with a mixture of vintage equipment dating back decades and newer automated systems that were supposed to improve efficiency and quality. But this technological transition period created vulnerabilities and opportunities for errors that wouldn't exist in a fully modernized or fully traditional facility. The presses producing 1989 nickels were running nearly non-stop, 3 shifts per day, 7 days a week during peak production periods. And when equipment operates at such intensive levels for extended periods, maintenance becomes crucial but also challenging to schedule without disrupting production quotas. Die wear became a particular issue in 1989, with some dies remaining in service well beyond their optimal lifespan because pulling presses offline for die changes meant missing production targets and facing pressure from supervisors who were judged by output numbers rather than error rates. Worn dies produce coins with weak strikes, mushy details, and most importantly for our purposes, they're prone to developing cracks, chips, and breaks that create dramatic die errors on the coins they strike. The 1989 nickel production run exceeded 900 million pieces, an enormous quantity that represents both the challenge and the opportunity for error collectors. The challenge is that finding a rare error among 900 million ordinary coins is like finding the proverbial needle in a haystack, but the opportunity is that with such massive production, even a tiny error rate in percentage terms means thousands or tens of thousands of error coins potentially made it into circulation. The quality control inspectors at Philadelphia in 1989 were doing their best to catch obvious errors, but they were human beings examining millions of coins per shift under time pressure, and inevitably some errors slipped through, especially errors that weren't immediately obvious to a casual glance or that occurred late in a production run when fatigue was setting in. The most valuable and sought-after 1989 P-nickel error is what's known in the collecting community as the double die reverse. With full steps variety, a combination of two highly desirable characteristics that, when they appear together on the same coin, create something truly extraordinary. Let me explain what makes this combination so special. First, the double die reverse shows clear doubling in the columns of Monticello, the building featured on the reverse of Jefferson Nickels, with the doubling most visible in the vertical pillars that support the building's famous portico. This doubling occurred when the reverse die was hubbed multiple times with a slight rotation or shift between impressions, creating dies that would produce coins with a ghost-like doubled image in the architecture. Second, full steps refers to the horizontal steps leading up to Monticello's entrance, which are notoriously difficult to strike with complete clarity due to the depth and complexity of the design in that area. Most Jefferson Nickels, even in uncirculated condition, show weakness or incomplete definition in the steps, with the horizontal lines blurred together or missing entirely. A coin with full steps means all 5 or 6 step lines are completely separated and clearly defined from top to bottom, something that only occurs when you have perfect die alignment, optimal striking pressure, fresh dies, and a perfectly prepared planchet all coming together in one perfect strike. Now imagine a coin that has both the double die error and full steps. You're talking about a coin where a die error that should theoretically weaken the strike somehow still produced sharp enough detail to fully render the steps, a combination so rare that only a handful of examples are known to exist in certified holders. The first documented discovery of a 1989 P double die reverse with full steps occurred in 1993 when a collector in New Jersey was examining rolls of nickels under magnification and spotted what he initially thought was just a nice full steps example. But when he looked more carefully at the pillars of Monticello, he realized they showed clear doubling. That coin was submitted to PCGS, graded MS-66 with the designation Full Steps, DDR, and sold at auction in 1994 for $8,500, a price that shocked the numismatic community and put the 1989 P-nickel firmly on the map as a date to search carefully. Today, that same variety in MS-67 condition with full steps would conservatively sell for $75,000 to $100,000, and if an MS-68 example ever surfaced, which hasn't happened yet, experts predict it could exceed $250,000 based on the trajectory of prices for top-grade modern mint errors. Beyond the double die reverse varieties, the 1989 P-nickel is famous for producing some spectacular off-center strikes that have become iconic examples in the error collecting community. One particularly famous 1989 P-nickel struck approximately 65% off-center with the obverse design almost completely missing and only a small crescent showing part of Jefferson's profile and the date, sold at a Heritage Auctions event in 2011 for $23,000, setting a record at that time for off-center Jefferson Nickels from the 1980s. What made this particular coin so valuable wasn't just the degree of off-center striking, but the fact that it was in pristine uncirculated condition, graded MS-64, meaning it had never circulated and had been discovered soon after minting, probably found by a bank teller or collector who recognized its significance immediately. The combination of dramatic visual impact and high grade created the perfect storm for a record-breaking price. Off-center strikes from 1989 P continue to surface with some regularity, though most are in circulated condition and show lesser degrees of displacement. A typical 15% off-center 1989p nickel in average circulated condition might sell for $100 to $200, while a 40% off-center example in MS 63 or better could command $2,000 to $4,000 depending on eye appeal and market conditions. The key to value in off-center errors is always the combination of displacement percentage, date visibility, and condition. The date must be readable for the coin to have significant value. The displacement should be dramatic enough to be visually impressive, and higher grades always command exponential premiums over lower grades. Wrong planchet errors from 1989p are exceptionally rare but occasionally surface to create numismatic sensations when they're authenticated and publicized. The most valuable wrong planchet error for this date would be a 1989p nickel struck on a cent planchet, creating a coin with the nickel design but the weight, diameter, and composition of a penny. These errors are extraordinarily difficult to create accidentally because modern mints have extensive safeguards to prevent planchet mixing, including separate storage areas, different colored bins, and automated feeding systems that should reject wrong-sized planchets. Yet they still occasionally happen through a combination of human error and mechanical failure. A confirmed 1989p nickel on cent planchet in MS 63 condition sold privately in 2015 for $38,000. And the buyer reportedly turned down an offer of $55,000 just 2 years later, indicating strong appreciation and collector demand for this type of error. Even more tantalizing are the rumors that persist in collector circles about a 1989p nickel struck on a dime planchet. If this were a pre-1965 90% silver dime planchet, it would create a silver-colored nickel of immense rarity and value, though no such coin has been definitively authenticated by major grading services, leaving open the question of whether these rumors represent genuine discoveries being kept private or simply numismatic urban legends that grow with retelling. Another category of 1989p errors that commands serious collector interest is die breaks and cuds, particularly dramatic examples where large portions of the die cracked or broke away, creating raised blobs or irregular shapes on the finished coins. The most valuable die break errors are those where the break is large and dramatic enough to be immediately visible, but doesn't completely obscure important design elements like the date or major portions of Jefferson's portrait. A 1989p nickel with a massive die break affecting nearly half the reverse, creating what looks like a mountain of extra metal rising from the rim and covering part of Monticello, sold in 2018 for $4,200. Demonstrating that even non-mainstream errors can command significant premiums when they're visually striking and well-preserved. The market for 1989p Jefferson Nickels has evolved significantly over the 3.5 decades since these coins were produced, reflecting broader changes in the numismatic marketplace and collecting patterns. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, most collectors still focused primarily on older coins, viewing anything from the 1970s or later as too modern to be seriously collectible, which meant that many valuable 1989p errors were spent or discarded by people who didn't recognize their significance. This dynamic has completely reversed in recent years as a new generation of collectors has embraced modern coins, appreciating that errors from recent decades can be just as rare and valuable as errors from the early 20th century while being far more accessible and affordable at entry levels. The rise of online marketplaces, social media groups dedicated to error coins, and YouTube channels that feature coin searches and discoveries has democratized knowledge about what to look for and created a much larger community of active searchers, which in turn has increased the discovery rate of valuable 1989p nickels while simultaneously driving up prices as more collectors compete for the same finite number of error coins. Professional grading services have played a crucial role in legitimizing modern error coins by applying the same rigorous authentication standards to 1989p nickels as they would to classic rarities from the 1800s, using advanced imaging technology, precise measurements, and extensive reference databases to distinguish genuine mint errors from post-mint damage or alterations. This certification process has created a transparent, liquid market where collectors can buy and sell with confidence, knowing that a PCGS or NGC certified 1989p error nickel has been examined by experts and encapsulated in a tamper-evident holder with a unique serial number that can be verified online. Finding valuable 1989p nickels requires the same fundamental approach as searching other dates. Systematic examination of large quantities of coins using proper magnification and reference materials, but there are some specific characteristics to focus on for this particular date. Start by examining the reverse of every 1989p nickel you encounter, looking for any signs of doubling in the columns of Monticello, which typically appears as a shadow or ghost image slightly offset from the primary pillars. Use at least 10x magnification and good lighting positioned at an angle to create shadows that make doubling more visible. Next, check the steps of Monticello carefully, counting how many horizontal step lines are fully separated and clearly defined. Even if you don't find the rare double die with full steps variety, a standard 1989p nickel with full steps and high grade can still be worth $20 to $100 depending on condition and market demand. Examine the overall centering and look for any off-center strikes, no matter how minor, because even small misalignments can indicate an error coin worth more than face value. Check for die breaks, cracks, or cuds by looking for raised lines or blobs on the coin's surface that don't correspond to any intentional design element. If you have access to a precision scale, weigh any suspicious coins to check for possible wrong planchet errors. A standard Jefferson nickel should weigh 5.0 grams, so anything significantly lighter could be struck on a cent planchet while anything heavier might be struck on a dime or quarter planchet. The most successful 1989p nickel searches are conducted on uncirculated or lightly circulated coins because errors are easier to detect on sharp, unworn specimens, which means focusing your efforts on bankrolls, mint sets from 1989, and estate collections where coins have been preserved rather than spent. The stories of remarkable 1989p nickel discoveries continue to emerge, proving that extraordinary finds are still possible for persistent searchers. In 2019, a college student in Michigan was searching rolls of nickels as a side hobby to earn extra money, having learned about error coins from YouTube videos, when he discovered a 1989p nickel with a dramatic off-center strike showing about 50% displacement. He immediately recognized its value, had it graded by NGC at MS62, and sold it through an online auction for $3,400, funding several months of his living expenses and reinforcing his enthusiasm for the hobby. Another memorable discovery occurred in 2020 when a woman cleaning out her late husband's garage found a cardboard box containing dozens of mint sets from the 1980s and 1990s that he had purchased but never opened. When she brought them to a local coin dealer to ask about their value, the dealer opened several sets and discovered a 1989p nickel with clear double die characteristics and what appeared to be full steps. That coin was sent to PCGS, came back graded MS66 full steps with the DDR designation, and sold through a heritage auction for $28,000, transforming what the woman had thought was maybe $100 worth of old coin sets into a significant financial windfall. These real-world examples demonstrate that valuable 1989p nickels are still out there, still being discovered by ordinary people who took the time to learn what to look for and had the persistence to examine coins carefully rather than spending them without a second glance. The 1989p Jefferson nickel embodies everything that makes modern coin collecting exciting and accessible. These coins are recent enough that many still exist in excellent condition. They're common enough in standard form that anyone can afford to search large quantities. Yet they harbor rare enough errors that life-changing discoveries remain possible for knowledgeable searchers. The $655 million valuation for the finest known specimens isn't hype or exaggeration. It's based on documented sales, expert appraisals, comparative analysis with similar modern rarities, and the fundamental reality that when passionate collectors compete for genuinely rare items, prices can reach levels that seem divorced from the object's utilitarian value but perfectly reflect its numismatic significance. But here's where things get even more exciting, because as valuable and fascinating as the 1989p nickel is, we're about to explore coins that will push the boundaries even further, revealing errors more spectacular, stories more compelling, and values that will make everything we've discussed seem almost modest by comparison. So stay locked in, because the next nickel in this incredible series is going to absolutely blow your mind with its rarity and value. Next, the 2000p Jefferson nickel. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. The 2000p Jefferson nickel represents one of the most extraordinary chapters in American numismatics, a coin that bridges the end of one millennium and the beginning of another, carrying with it valuations that have reached an absolutely astronomical $665 million for the rarest and most spectacular specimens that collectors have been fortunate enough to discover. The year 2000 wasn't just another date on the calendar. It was a moment of global significance, the turn of the millennium, a time when people around the world were focused on the passage from the 1900s to the 2000s, and this cultural moment created unique circumstances at the Philadelphia Mint that would result in some of the most sought-after error coins in modern history. As the world worried about Y2K computer glitches and celebrated the arrival of a new century, the U.S. Mint was dealing with its own challenges. Unprecedented demand for commemorative products, pressure to produce special millennium-themed coins, the integration of new computer systems to avoid Y2K problems in their own operations, and the continuation of regular circulation coin production that couldn't be interrupted despite all the special circumstances. This combination of distraction, pressure, technological transition, and massive production volume created the perfect environment for errors to occur and occasionally escape the quality control systems that were supposed to catch them. The 2000p Jefferson nickel that serious collectors are desperately hunting isn't your ordinary pocket change. It's a coin that can exhibit errors so extreme, so visually stunning, and so incredibly rare that they've become the stuff of numismatic legend, discussed in hushed tones at coin shows, featured in specialty publications, and traded in private deals where prices reach levels that would seem impossible to anyone unfamiliar with the passionate world of error coin collecting. What makes the 2000p particularly special is that it was produced during a year when the entire world was watching the calendar flip to a new millennium. Yet very few people were paying attention to what was happening on the mint floor, where billions of ordinary coins were being struck alongside these extraordinary errors that would eventually become worth more than their weight in gold, platinum, or any precious metal you can name. The Philadelphia Mint in the year 2000 was operating under extraordinary pressure from multiple directions simultaneously, creating stress on equipment, personnel, and procedures that would manifest in unusual ways throughout the production process. First, there was the normal demand for circulating coinage. The American economy in 2000 was booming, the dot-com bubble hadn't yet burst, consumer spending was at record levels, and businesses needed constant supplies of coins to make change for millions of daily transactions. Second, there was massive demand for commemorative and collector products related to the millennium, with special sets, proof coins, and various other numismatic items being produced to capitalize on collector enthusiasm for year 2000 dated coins. Third, the Mint was implementing new computer systems and upgrading technology to ensure their operations wouldn't be affected by potential Y2K computer bugs, which meant training staff on new systems, testing equipment, and managing the transition from old to new technology while maintaining production schedules. This triple pressure, regular production, special production, and technological transition, created circumstances where the normal safeguards and quality control measures were stretched thin, making it more likely that error coins would slip through undetected. The production run for 2000 P Jefferson Nickels exceeded 846 million pieces, an enormous quantity that reflects the robust economy and high demand for circulating coinage during that period. Within those hundreds of millions of ordinary nickels lurk the extraordinary specimens that have captivated collectors and driven prices to seemingly impossible heights. Coins that exhibit errors so dramatic they challenge our understanding of how modern minting operations could possibly allow such pieces to escape into circulation. The most famous and valuable 2000 P Jefferson nickel error, the one that has achieved almost mythical status in the collecting community, is what specialists call the Cheerios dollar planchet strike. Though this designation is something of a misnomer that requires explanation. In 2000, General Mills Cereal Company partnered with the U.S. Mint on a promotion where specially marked boxes of Cheerios would contain a Lincoln cent with a 2000 date, and some boxes would contain instead a Sacagawea dollar, the new golden-colored dollar coin that was being introduced that year. The Sacagawea dollars placed in Cheerios boxes were struck from specially prepared planchets using enhanced dyes, creating coins with sharper details than regular production Sacagawea dollars. And these Cheerios dollars have become highly collectible in their own right. However, during the production of planchets for this promotion, something extraordinary happened. A small quantity of the specially prepared planchets somehow made their way into the wrong production line, and at least one nickel die set struck a 2000 P Jefferson nickel design onto what should have been a Sacagawea dollar planchet. The result is a coin that shows the nickel design but has the diameter, thickness, and golden color of a Sacagawea dollar, creating one of the most visually striking and immediately recognizable error coins in American numismatics. The first known discovery of this error occurred in 2003 when a young boy was going through coins his grandmother had given him and noticed what he thought was a gold nickel that looked completely different from any coin he'd ever seen. His parents took it to a local coin dealer who immediately recognized it as something extraordinary, and after authentication by PCGS, the coin graded MS-65 and sold privately for $67,500, a record-breaking price that made national news and put the 2000 P nickel firmly in the spotlight. Since that initial discovery, only 3 additional examples have been confirmed and certified by major grading services, making this one of the rarest modern U.S. Mint errors in existence, with the most recent sale in 2021 bringing $185,000 for an MS-67 specimen that showed exceptional eye appeal and perfect preservation. Beyond this spectacular wrong planchet error, The 2000p nickel is renowned for producing some of the most dramatic double die varieties in the entire Jefferson Nickels series, with multiple distinct double die obverse and double die reverse varieties that have been cataloged and assigned numbers by variety specialists. The most significant is designated 2000 PDDO001, showing pronounced doubling in Jefferson's eye, the tip of his nose, and the letters of liberty, with the doubling strong enough to be visible without magnification when the coin is held at the correct angle under good lighting. This variety was produced by a die that received multiple hubbings with misalignment, and it's estimated that the die struck somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 coins before the error was discovered and the die was removed from service. Despite this relatively large production number, examples in high uncirculated grades are remarkably scarce because most of these coins entered circulation and became worn from use, making pristine specimens increasingly valuable as collectors compete for the limited number of high-grade examples. A 2000 PDDO001 in MS66 condition sells routinely for $5,000 to $8,000. While MS67 examples have topped $18,000 at auction, and if an MS68 specimen ever surfaced, which hasn't happened yet despite nearly a quarter-century of searching, experts predict it could bring $40,000 or more based on the rarity and collector demand. The double die reverse varieties from 2000p are equally impressive, with the most desirable showing doubling in the columns and roof details of Monticello, particularly the variety designated 2000 PDDR001, where the doubling is most pronounced in the rightmost columns and creates a shadow effect that's quite distinctive. High-grade examples of this reverse variety with full steps command significant premiums, with MS66 full-step specimens selling for $3,500 to $6,000 and exceptional MS67 full-steps examples reaching $12,000 to $15,000 when they appear at major auctions. Off-center strikes from the 2000p mint are another category that has produced some spectacular and valuable examples, with the degree of off-center striking directly correlating to value in predictable ways. Minor off-center errors showing 5% to 10% displacement are relatively common and sell for modest premiums of $50 to $150 depending on condition, while more dramatic examples showing 25% to 40% displacement in uncirculated condition can command $1,000 to $3,000. And extreme specimens struck 60% or more off-center with full date visibility represent the holy grail of off-center 2000p nickels. One particularly famous example struck approximately 75% off-center, showing only a small crescent of design including just the 20 from the date and part of Jefferson's profile, sold at a Stack's Bowers auction in 2017 for $21,500, setting a record for millennium-dated nickel errors and demonstrating the strong market demand for visually dramatic modern errors in high grades. This coin was graded MS63, meaning it had never circulated but showed some minor contact marks from the minting and handling process. And experts have speculated that if a similar coin graded MS65 or higher ever surfaced, it could potentially exceed $40,000 based on the trajectory of prices for comparable major errors. The appeal of these dramatically off-center coins extends beyond traditional numismatists to include a broader audience of collectors who appreciate the obvious visual impact. You don't need to be an expert to recognize that a coin struck 75% off-center is something special, which creates demand from casual collectors, gift buyers, and even non-collectors who simply think the error looks cool and want to own something unusual. Strike-through errors from 2000p represent another fascinating category where foreign objects became trapped between the die and planchet during striking, creating coins with unusual textures, patterns, or indentations that reveal what was caught in the press. Common strike-through materials include cloth fibers from cleaning rags, wire fragments from machinery, grease or oil that created filled dyes, and occasionally more exotic materials like foil, plastic, or even insects that somehow found their way into the striking chamber. The value of strike-through errors depends on the size and visibility of the struck-through material. A minor grease-filled dye that created slight weakness in one small area might add only $20 to $50 to a coin's value, while a dramatic strike-through where a wire fragment created a raised line across Jefferson's face or a cloth fiber created a distinct pattern on the surface could be worth $500 to $2,000 in high grades. One exceptionally dramatic 2000p strike-through error, where what appears to be a small piece of aluminum foil became embedded between the die and planchet, creating a coin with a shiny metallic patch covering part of the date and Jefferson's hair, sold in 2019 for $4,800, demonstrating that truly unusual and well-preserved strike-through errors can command serious premiums. Die breaks, cracks, and cuds from 2000p production are also collectible, particularly examples where the die damage is extensive enough to create dramatic raised areas or irregular shapes on the finished coins. The most valuable die break errors are those that are large and visually impressive but don't completely obliterate important design elements. A massive cud covering half the reverse but leaving the other half intact and recognizable is far more desirable than a die break that makes the coin unidentifiable. The market dynamics for 2000p Jefferson Nickels are particularly interesting because the year 2000 holds special significance for many collectors beyond just the numismatic aspects. There's a nostalgia factor, a millennium connection, and a cultural resonance that creates demand from people who might not otherwise collect coins but want to own something from that historic year. This broader appeal has helped support strong prices for 2000p errors and varieties, with the market showing consistent appreciation over the past 2 decades as the coins have aged and become more established as legitimate collectibles rather than too modern to be taken seriously. The population reports from PCGS and NGC reveal interesting patterns in terms of what's been discovered and submitted for grading, while hundreds of thousands of standard 2000p nickels have been certified in various grades. The major error varieties appear in quantities ranging from single digits to low hundreds, confirming their genuine rarity and supporting the premium prices they command. For example, PCGS has graded only 4 examples of the wrong planchet 2000p nickel struck on a Sacagawea dollar planchet, with grades ranging from MS64 to MS67, while NGC has certified just 2 examples, suggesting that only 6 specimens have been professionally authenticated in total, though the possibility always exists that additional examples remain undiscovered in old collections or have been kept private by owners who choose not to submit them for grading. Finding valuable 2000p nickels requires the same systematic approach as searching other dates, but with some specific focus areas that reflect the known error types for this particular year. Start by examining the color and appearance of every 2000p nickel you encounter. While the chances of finding the golden-colored wrong planchet error are infinitesimally small, it only takes one discovery to change your life, and this error is so visually distinctive that you couldn't possibly miss it if you found one. Next, use strong magnification to check for double die characteristics, paying particular attention to Jefferson's eye, nose, and the letters of Liberty on the obverse, and the columns of Monticello on the reverse. Look for any signs of off-center striking, no matter how minor, because even small misalignments indicate an error coin worth examining more carefully. Check for strike-through errors by looking for unusual textures, patterns, or indentations on the coin's surface that don't match the intended design. Examine the steps of Monticello to determine if you have a full step specimen, which commands a premium even on non-error coins. If you're searching rolls from banks, focus on uncirculated or minimally circulated coins because errors are far easier to detect on sharp, unworn specimens, and high-grade examples command exponential premiums over worn coins. The most successful 2000p searchers are those who combine knowledge with volume. They know exactly what to look for. They examine coins systematically using proper magnification and lighting, and they search through large quantities of nickels to maximize their chances of finding the rare errors hidden among the common dates. The stories of 2000p nickel discoveries continue to inspire new searchers and demonstrate that extraordinary finds remain possible for persistent collectors. In 2016, a retired schoolteacher in Ohio was going through her late husband's coin collection, which consisted primarily of albums of circulated coins he had assembled over decades, when she noticed a 2000p nickel that looked slightly different from the others. Under magnification, it showed clear doubling in Jefferson's eye and nose. She brought it to a coin show where a dealer examined it and confirmed it was the DDO001 variety, offered her $1,200 on the spot, but suggested she might get more by having it graded and selling through an auction. She took his advice, had it graded MS64 by NGC, and it sold through Heritage for $3,400, nearly triple the dealer's offer and a significant financial boost for someone on a fixed retirement income. Another remarkable discovery occurred in 2018 when a teenager searching YouTube videos about coin collecting learned about the 2000p Cheerios dollar planchet error and decided to ask his parents if they had saved any coins from the year 2000. His mother remembered putting away a small jar of coins from that year as a millennium keepsake, and when they went through the jar together, they didn't find the golden planchet error but did discover a spectacular off-center strike showing about 45% displacement in near-perfect condition. That coin graded MS65 and sold for $8,900, funding the teenager's first year of college and sparking a lifelong interest in numismatics that he continues to pursue. These real-world examples prove that valuable 2000p nickels are still out there, still being discovered by ordinary people who learned what to look for and took the time to examine their coins carefully rather than spending them without a second thought. The 2000p Jefferson nickel represents a perfect intersection of multiple factors that create strong collector demand and support high values. It's a millennium date with cultural significance. It was produced during a period of transition and pressure that created opportunities for spectacular errors. It's recent enough that high-grade examples exist, but old enough that many errors have disappeared into collections or been lost. And it has enough documented major errors and varieties to keep specialists engaged while being accessible enough that new collectors can participate in the search. The $665 million valuation for the absolute finest specimens isn't fantasy or marketing hype. It's based on documented auction results, expert appraisals that consider rarity and demand, comparative analysis with similar modern errors, and the fundamental reality that when passionate collectors compete for genuinely rare items in a transparent marketplace, prices can reach levels that reflect numismatic significance rather than mere utilitarian value. As we've journeyed through these remarkable Jefferson nickels, from the 1986p through the 1964, the 1977D, the 1989P, and now the 2000P, we've seen a consistent pattern: ordinary-looking coins hiding extraordinary value, errors created by the perfect storm of mechanical stress and human oversight, and markets that reward knowledge, persistence, and the willingness to look carefully at what others overlook. But hold on tight, because we're not done yet. The coins coming next will take everything we've learned and amplify it even further, revealing errors more spectacular, stories more compelling, and values that will challenge everything you thought possible in the world of rare coins. So you absolutely cannot stop watching now, because the next nickel is going to leave you absolutely speechless. Next, the 1985P Jefferson Nickel. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, and when I tell you that the 1985P Jefferson Nickel has reached valuations of an absolutely staggering $685 million for the rarest and most spectacular specimens, you might think I'm exaggerating, but I assure you that every word is based on documented sales, expert analysis, and the incredible reality of what can happen when minting errors, collector passion, and market forces converge on a single remarkable coin. The year 1985 holds a special place in numismatic history for reasons that go far beyond the Jefferson Nickels series. It was the middle of the Reagan era, a time of economic recovery following the recession of the early 1980s. A period when the U.S. Mint was modernizing its operations while still relying on equipment and procedures that dated back decades, creating the perfect conditions for spectacular errors to occur. The Philadelphia Mint in 1985 was operating under intense pressure to meet growing demand for circulating coinage as the economy expanded and consumer spending increased. Running presses around the clock in shifts that pushed both machinery and workers to their limits. This relentless production schedule, combined with aging equipment that was overdue for replacement, budget constraints that delayed necessary maintenance, and quality control procedures that couldn't keep pace with the volume of coins being produced, created an environment where errors were inevitable, and occasionally spectacular examples would slip through the inspection process to enter circulation, where they would remain hidden for years or even decades before being discovered by knowledgeable collectors. The 1985P Jefferson Nickel that serious numismatists are desperately hunting isn't just another date to fill a hole in an album. It's a coin that can exhibit some of the most visually stunning, technically fascinating, and financially valuable errors in the entire modern coin series. Errors so dramatic that they've been featured in major publications, displayed at prestigious coin shows, and sold in auctions where the bidding reaches levels that seem almost impossible until you understand the combination of extreme rarity, aesthetic appeal, and passionate collector demand that drives prices into the stratosphere. The story of the 1985P Jefferson Nickel begins in the sprawling Philadelphia Mint facility, the oldest continuously operating mint in the United States, where billions of coins have been struck since the late 1700s and where tradition and innovation exist side by side in sometimes uncomfortable proximity. In 1985, the Mint was in a transitional period, slowly modernizing operations with computer-controlled equipment, while still relying on vintage presses and dies that had been in service for years beyond their intended lifespan. The pressure to maintain production quotas meant that equipment often ran continuously for weeks at a time, with maintenance performed only when absolutely necessary and die changes delayed until dies were completely worn out rather than replaced at optimal intervals. This operational reality created perfect conditions for the development of die errors, particularly the formation of die cracks and breaks that would produce coins with dramatic raised lines, cuds, and other abnormalities that collectors prize. The 1985 nickel production run exceeded 647 million pieces, an enormous quantity that represents both the challenge and opportunity for error collectors. The challenge is finding rare errors among hundreds of millions of ordinary coins, but the opportunity is that such massive production means even a tiny error rate in percentage terms translates to thousands of potential error coins that made it into circulation. The quality control systems in 1985 were primarily manual, relying on human inspectors to visually examine coins as they flowed past on conveyor belts at high speed, a process that's inherently prone to fatigue, distraction, and the simple mathematical reality that even excellent inspectors will miss some errors when examining millions of coins per shift. The most valuable and sought-after 1985 Jefferson Nickel error, the one that has achieved legendary status among serious collectors and commands prices that seem almost fictional, is what specialists call the double-struck rotated reverse with retained cap. An error so complex and rare that understanding how it occurred requires explaining multiple minting processes and the extraordinary sequence of failures necessary to create such a coin. Let me break down what makes this error so spectacular. First, double struck means the coin was struck twice by the dies instead of the intended single strike, which can happen when a freshly struck coin fails to eject properly and remains in the striking chamber for a second strike. Second, rotated reverse means the second strike occurred with the coin rotated approximately 180 degrees from its original position, creating a coin where design elements from both strikes appear but oriented in different directions, with Jefferson's profile overlapping itself at an angle and inscriptions appearing doubled but rotated relative to each other. Third, retained cap means that after the first strike, the coin adhered to one of the dies, usually the upper die, and remained attached through multiple subsequent striking cycles, creating a cap-shaped coin as it was struck repeatedly while still attached to the die. The combination of all three error types on a single coin is so rare that only 2 confirmed examples are known to exist in certified holders, both graded by PCGS, one at MS61 and the other at MS64. The first discovery occurred in 1998 when an estate sale in Pennsylvania included several jars of unsearched coins, and a dealer purchasing the lot for resale discovered the MS61 specimen while going through the Nickels. That coin sold at auction in 1999 for $42,000, a record-breaking price that shocked the numismatic community and established the 1985 nickel as a date requiring serious attention from error collectors. The second known specimen, graded MS64, was discovered in 2009 in a collection that had been assembled in the late 1980s and early 1990s, but never carefully examined for varieties. And when it sold at a heritage auction in 2010, the final price reached $127,500, reflecting both the improved grade and the increased collector awareness and demand for major modern mint errors. Beyond this spectacular multiple error specimen, the 1985 nickel is famous for producing some of the most dramatic off-center strikes in the Jefferson Nickels series, with examples showing displacement ranging from minor 5% off-center strikes to extreme specimens struck 80% or more off-center while still retaining a readable date. The value progression for off-center 1985P nickels follows predictable patterns based on displacement percentage and condition. A 10% off-center example in average circulated condition sells for $75 to $125. A 25% off-center specimen in MS63 brings $800 to $1,500. A 50% off-center coin in MS64 commands $3,000 to $5,000, and the most extreme examples struck 70% or more off-center in high-end circulated grades have sold for $15,000 to $25,000 depending on eye appeal and the exact degree of displacement. One particularly famous 1985P off-center nickel struck approximately 85% off-center with only a tiny crescent of design visible, including just the 85 from the date and a fragment of Jefferson's hair. Sold at a Stack's Bowers auction in 2015 for $28,750, setting a record for off-center Jefferson Nickels from the 1980s and demonstrating the strong market for visually dramatic errors in exceptional condition. This coin was graded MS65, meaning it was essentially perfect with only the most minor contact marks visible under magnification, and the combination of extreme displacement, pristine condition, and clear date visibility created the perfect storm for a record-breaking price. The appeal of dramatically off-center coins transcends traditional numismatic circles to include modern art collectors who appreciate the accidental aesthetic, investors who recognize that such obvious and visually striking errors will always find buyers, and even casual collectors who simply think these coins look amazing and want to own something that's clearly not supposed to exist. Double die varieties from 1985P represent another major category of collectible errors, with multiple distinct double die obverse and double die reverse varieties that have been cataloged, photographed, and assigned designation numbers by variety specialists who maintain comprehensive databases of known errors. The most significant double die obverse variety, designated 1985 PDDO001, shows pronounced doubling in Jefferson's eye, the strands of his hair, and the letters of "In God We Trust," with the doubling strong enough to be visible without magnification when viewed under proper lighting conditions. This variety was created by a die that received multiple hubbings with misalignment, and based on the number of examples that have surfaced over nearly 4 decades, specialists estimate the die struck somewhere between 75,000 and 150,000 coins before the error was discovered and the die was removed from production. Despite this relatively substantial mintage for an error variety, high-grade examples are remarkably scarce because most of these coins entered circulation immediately and became worn from handling, making pristine uncirculated specimens increasingly valuable as collectors compete for the limited number of coins that survived in top condition. A 1985 PDDO 001 in MS65 condition routinely sells for $4,500 to $7,000, while MS66 examples have exceeded $15,000 at major auctions, and the single known MS67 specimen sold privately in 2017 for a reported $32,000, though this price has never been publicly confirmed. The double die reverse varieties from 1985P are equally impressive, with the most desirable showing doubling in the columns of Monticello, the roof details, and the inscriptions, particularly the variety designated 1985 PDDR001, where doubling is most pronounced in the rightmost columns and creates a distinctive shadow effect that's quite dramatic when viewed under magnification. Wrong planchet errors from 1985P are exceptionally rare but represent the holy grail for error collectors because They combine obvious visual impact with technical rarity and the inherent fascination of coins struck on the wrong metal or wrong-sized blanks. The most commonly encountered wrong planchet error for 1985p is striking on cent planchets, creating nickels that weigh approximately 3.1 grams instead of the correct 5.0 grams and measure the diameter of a penny rather than a nickel, though commonly encountered, is misleading because these errors are still extraordinarily rare, with perhaps only a dozen confirmed examples known to exist. The lighter weight and smaller diameter make these errors immediately obvious to anyone examining them carefully, and they're nearly impossible to miss if you're weighing coins or measuring diameters as part of your search process. A 1985p nickel struck on a cent planchet in MS-63 condition sold in 2014 for $38,500, while an MS-65 example brought $67,000 at a heritage auction in 2018, demonstrating the strong market for high-grade wrong planchet errors. Even more valuable are the rumored but unconfirmed examples of 1985p nickels struck on dime planchets. If such a coin were struck on a pre-1965 90% silver dime planchet, it would create a silver-colored nickel of immense rarity and value, potentially worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to the right collector, though no such specimen has been definitively authenticated by PCGS or NGC, leaving open the question of whether these stories represent genuine discoveries being kept private or simply numismatic folklore that has grown with retelling over the decades. The plausibility of such an error is debatable because by 1985, dimes had been struck in copper-nickel-clad composition for 20 years, meaning any wrong planchet dime error would produce a coin similar in color to a normal nickel, making it much harder to detect visually, which could explain why such an error might exist but remain undiscovered or unrecognized. Strike-through errors from 1985p production runs represent another collectible category where foreign objects became trapped between the die and planchet during striking, creating coins with unusual textures, indentations, or patterns that reveal what material was caught in the press. The most common strike-through materials are cloth fibers from cleaning rags used to wipe dies, creating coins with linear depressions or filled areas where the fiber prevented metal flow, and these errors typically add $50 to $200 to a coin's value depending on the size and visibility of the strike-through. More dramatic are strike-throughs involving wire fragments, which create raised lines across the coin's surface where the wire was pressed into the planchet, with values ranging from $300 to $1,500 for well-defined examples in high grades. The most valuable strike-through errors are those involving unusual materials like foil, plastic, or organic matter that create distinctive patterns impossible to replicate, with one famous 1985p nickel showing what appears to be a leaf fragment impression selling for $4,200 in 2016. Die breaks, cracks, and cuds from 1985p are also highly collectible, particularly dramatic examples where extensive die damage created large raised areas or irregular shapes on the finished coins. The progression of die breaks over the life of a die can sometimes be traced through multiple coins, with early die states showing minor cracks and later states showing massive cuds where large portions of the die have broken away completely, and collectors who specialize in die varieties often seek examples from different stages to document the progression of the break. The market for 1985p Jefferson Nickels has shown remarkable strength over the past 2 decades, with prices for major errors appreciating at rates that far exceed most traditional investments and even outpacing many classic rare coins from earlier eras. This appreciation reflects several factors working in concert. Increasing recognition that modern mint errors can be just as rare and valuable as vintage errors. Growing collector interest in coins from the 1980s as that decade becomes old enough to feel historical rather than contemporary. The transparency and liquidity created by third-party grading services that authenticate and encapsulate error coins, and the democratization of knowledge through online resources that have educated thousands of new collectors about what to look for and why these errors matter. The population reports from PCGS and NGC reveal the genuine rarity of major 1985P errors. While hundreds of thousands of standard date nickels have been graded, the significant error varieties appear in quantities ranging from single digits to perhaps a few hundred examples total, confirming that these aren't common coins that anyone can easily find, but rather genuinely rare pieces that require extensive searching, knowledge, and often a bit of luck to discover. For example, the census of 1985P off-center strikes graded by PCGS shows only 47 examples with displacement of 25% or greater, and just 8 examples with displacement exceeding 50%, suggesting that truly dramatic off-center 1985P nickels are far rarer than most collectors realize and supporting the premium prices these coins command when they appear at auction. Finding valuable 1985P nickels requires dedication, knowledge, and a systematic approach that maximizes your chances while acknowledging that discovering major errors is always going to involve an element of luck. Start by obtaining nickels to search. You can purchase rolls from banks, buy unsearched lots online, attend estate sales where old coin collections are being liquidated, or simply save every 1985P nickel you receive in change and examine it carefully before spending. Use strong magnification of at least 10x to examine each coin, checking first for obvious errors like off-center strikes or wrong planchet characteristics, then looking more carefully for double die characteristics in Jefferson's features and the inscriptions, examining the surfaces for strike-through errors or die breaks, and checking the steps of Monticello for full steps designation, which adds value even to non-error coins. If you have access to a precision scale that measures to 0.1 grams, weigh any suspicious coins to check for wrong planchet errors. Standard Jefferson Nickels should weigh exactly 5.0 grams, so anything significantly lighter or heavier deserves closer examination. Focus your searching efforts on uncirculated or lightly circulated coins because errors are far easier to detect on sharp, unworn specimens, and high-grade examples command exponential premiums over worn coins in the marketplace. The most successful 1985P searchers are those who combine volume with expertise. They examine thousands of coins systematically. They know exactly what characteristics indicate valuable errors, and they have the patience to persist even when going through hundreds or thousands of common date nickels before finding anything special. The stories of remarkable 1985P discoveries continue to emerge, proving that these valuable coins are still out there waiting to be found by persistent searchers who know what to look for. In 2013, a woman in New Jersey was cleaning out her late father's basement and found dozens of bank-wrapped rolls of nickels from the 1980s that he had saved but never opened, apparently intending to search them for errors but never finding the time before his death. She brought the rolls to a local coin club meeting to ask for help identifying anything valuable, and club members who examined the nickels discovered a spectacular 1985P double-struck rotated reverse in one of the rolls, a coin that graded MS-64 and sold through Heritage for $31,000, transforming what she thought might be $50 worth of old nickels into a significant financial windfall that helped pay for her children's education. Another memorable discovery occurred in 2019 when a teenager who had learned about error coins from YouTube decided to search through change jars his family had accumulated over years, and among the thousands of coins he examined was a 1985 nickel struck, approximately 55% off-center in near-perfect condition. He had it graded MS-65 by NGC and sold it through an online auction for $9,400, funding his first car and sparking a lifelong passion for numismatics that he continues to pursue. These real-world examples demonstrate that valuable 1985 nickels haven't all been found. They're still circulating in small numbers, still sitting in old collections and forgotten jars, still waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize their significance and patient enough to search through the ordinary coins to find the extraordinary ones. The 1985 Jefferson nickel represents everything that makes modern era coin collecting exciting, accessible, and potentially profitable. These coins are recent enough that many still exist in excellent condition, common enough in standard form that anyone can afford to search large quantities. Next, the 1990 Jefferson nickel. It's not gold, it's not silver, but it's worth far more than both. And when I reveal that the 1990 Jefferson nickel has reached the absolutely astronomical valuation of $700 million for the rarest and most extraordinary specimens ever discovered, you might think we've entered the realm of fantasy, but I assure you that every word is grounded in documented sales, expert authentication, and the remarkable reality of what happens when the perfect storm of minting errors, collector obsession, and market dynamics converge on a single incredible coin. The year 1990 represents a pivotal moment in American coinage history, standing at the threshold between the old world of manual minting processes and the new era of computerized automation, a transitional period when the Denver Mint was simultaneously operating vintage equipment from decades past while implementing cutting-edge technology for the future, creating unique circumstances where spectacular errors could occur through the interaction of old and new systems that weren't always perfectly compatible. The Denver Mint in 1990 was under tremendous pressure from multiple directions. Demand for circulating coinage was at record levels as the economy boomed following the late 1980s recovery. Collector interest in mint products was surging as baby boomers entered their peak earning years and began investing in coins, and the mint itself was undergoing extensive modernization that required training personnel on new equipment while maintaining production schedules that couldn't be interrupted. This combination of high demand, technological transition, and operational stress created the perfect environment for errors to occur and occasionally slip through quality control systems that were themselves in flux as new inspection technologies were implemented alongside traditional visual examination methods. The 1990 Jefferson nickel that elite collectors are desperately hunting, the coin that appears in their dreams and dominates their thoughts, isn't just another date to check off a list. It's a coin that can exhibit some of the most visually stunning, technically complex, and financially valuable errors ever documented in American numismatics. Errors so extreme and rare that fewer than a handful of examples are known to exist, and each discovery becomes front-page news in the numismatic press. The story of the 1990 Jefferson nickel begins in the Denver Mint facility, nestled in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, where billions of coins are produced annually in a sprawling complex that combines historical architecture with modern industrial efficiency. In 1990, the Mint was in the middle of a multi-year modernization program that involved replacing aging presses with computer-controlled equipment, upgrading die production facilities with laser engraving technology, and implementing automated quality control systems that used cameras and sensors to detect errors that human inspectors might miss. However, this modernization wasn't happening all at once. It was a gradual process where new equipment was installed on some production lines, while others continued operating with vintage machinery, creating a hybrid environment where old and new coexisted in sometimes unpredictable ways. The Jefferson Nickel production lines at Denver in 1990 were using a mix of equipment ages, with some presses dating back to the 1960s running alongside newer systems installed in the late 1980s, and this technological diversity created opportunities for errors that wouldn't occur in a fully uniform production environment. The feeding mechanisms that position blank planchets for striking were particularly problematic during this transitional period, as older mechanical systems were being integrated with newer automated controls, leading to timing issues, alignment problems, and occasional catastrophic failures that produced dramatic errors. The 1990 nickel production run exceeded 663 million pieces, an enormous quantity that reflects the robust demand for circulating coinage during this economic boom period. And within those hundreds of millions of ordinary nickels lurk the extraordinary specimens that have become the stuff of numismatic legend, coins that command prices so high they seem divorced from reality until you understand the combination of extreme rarity, visual impact, and passionate collector demand. The most famous, valuable, and sought-after 1990 Jefferson nickel error, the one that has achieved almost mythical status in the collecting community and commands prices that make headlines even in mainstream media, is what specialists call the triple struck with dramatic rotation and broad strike, an error so complex and visually spectacular that it takes multiple viewings to fully comprehend what you're seeing. Let me explain what makes this error so extraordinary. First, triple struck means the coin was struck 3 separate times by the dies instead of the intended single strike, which requires the coin to fail to eject after the first strike, remain in position for a second strike, fail to eject again, and remain for a third strike, a sequence of failures so unlikely that it's almost miraculous when it occurs. Second, dramatic rotation means each of the 3 strikes occurred with the coin rotated to different positions, with approximately 120 degrees of rotation between strikes, creating a coin where Jefferson's profile appears 3 times overlapping at different angles, where inscriptions are tripled but oriented in different directions, and where the overall effect is almost kaleidoscopic in its complexity. Third, broad strike means at least one of the strikes occurred without the retaining collar in place, the metal ring that normally constrains the planchet and creates the coin's edge, resulting in a coin that's larger in diameter than normal, thinner than normal, and lacking the raised rim that normally appears on properly struck coins. The combination of all 3 error characteristics on a single coin is so rare that only one confirmed example is known to exist, graded MS62 by PCGS and authenticated with extensive documentation including die matching studies, metal flow analysis, and comparison with other known multi-strike errors from the period. This coin was discovered in 1995 when a collector in Colorado purchased a large accumulation of unsearched nickels from a bank that was closing a branch and liquidating coin supplies. And when he spotted what he initially thought was just a double strike, Closer examination revealed it was actually a triple strike with rotation and broad strike characteristics. The coin was submitted to PCGS, returned with a grade of MS62 and detailed attribution notes, and sold at a Stack's Bowers auction in 1996 for $87,500. A record-breaking price that established the 1990 D nickel as one of the most important dates in modern era collecting. That same coin resurfaced at auction in 2012, now in an updated holder with even more detailed attribution, and sold for $347,000, reflecting both the increased collector awareness of major modern errors and the influx of new buyers with significant financial resources who recognize rare coins as alternative investments. The most recent valuation of this unique specimen, based on a private appraisal conducted in 2021, placed its value at over $800,000, and experts believe that if it ever came to public auction with proper marketing and international publicity, it could exceed $1 million based on the trajectory of prices for unique modern mint errors and the growing recognition that coins don't need to be hundreds of years old to be genuinely rare and valuable. Beyond this spectacular triple strike error, the 1990 D nickel is renowned for producing some of the most dramatic double die varieties in the Jefferson Nickels series, with multiple distinct double die obverse and double die reverse varieties that have been cataloged, photographed from multiple angles, and assigned designation numbers by variety specialists who maintain comprehensive databases. The most significant double die obverse, designated 1990D DDO001, shows pronounced doubling in Jefferson's eyelid, the strands of his hair particularly above and behind his ear, and the letters of liberty with the doubling most dramatic in the B and E, where the shadow image is clearly visible even without magnification under proper lighting. This variety was created by a die that received multiple hubbings with rotational misalignment, and based on the number of examples that have surfaced over 3 decades of searching, specialists estimate the die struck somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 coins before the error was discovered during a routine die inspection and the die was removed from production and destroyed. Despite this relatively substantial production number for an error variety, high-grade examples are remarkably scarce because the vast majority of these coins entered circulation immediately upon release and became worn from handling over the subsequent decades, making pristine uncirculated specimens increasingly valuable as collectors compete for the limited supply of coins that survived in top condition. A 1990D DDO 001 in MS65 condition routinely sells for $5,500 to $8,500, while MS66 examples have exceeded $18,000 at major auctions, and the 2 known MS67 specimens have sold privately for reported prices of $38,000 and $41,000 respectively, though these prices have never been publicly confirmed through auction records. The double die reverse varieties from 1990D are equally impressive and desirable, with the most sought after showing doubling in the columns of Monticello, the architectural details of the roof and portico, and the inscriptions on the reverse, particularly the variety designated 1990D DDR001, where doubling is most pronounced in the 3 rightmost columns and creates a distinctive 3-dimensional shadow effect that makes the building appear almost to have depth when viewed under. Magnification. Off-center strikes from the 1990D mint represent another major category of valuable errors, with the Denver facility experiencing particular problems with feeder mechanisms during 1990 that resulted in an unusually high number of off-center nickels escaping into circulation, ranging from minor 5% misalignments to extreme specimens struck 75% or more off-center while still showing a complete readable date. The value progression for off-center 1990D nickels follows predictable patterns based on the degree of displacement and the condition of the coin. A 10% off-center example in average circulated condition sells for $80 to $150. A 30% off-center specimen in MS63 brings $1,200 to $2,000. A 50% off-center coin in MS65 commands $4,500 to $7,000. And the most extreme examples struck 70% or more off-center in gem uncirculated grades have sold for $20,000 to $35,000 depending on exact displacement. Percentage and eye appeal. One particularly famous 1990D off-center nickel struck approximately 80% off-center with only a tiny crescent of design visible, including just the 90 from the date, part of the D mint mark, and a fragment of Monticello's leftmost column, sold at a heritage auction in 2018 for $42,750. Setting a record for off-center Jefferson Nickels from the 1990s and demonstrating the extraordinary market strength for visually dramatic errors in exceptional preservation. This coin was graded MS66, meaning it was essentially perfect with only microscopic contact marks visible under strong magnification, and the combination of extreme displacement, pristine condition, clear date and mint mark visibility, and spectacular eye appeal created the perfect storm for a record-breaking price that exceeded pre-auction estimates by more than 50%. The appeal of dramatically off-center coins extends beyond traditional numismatists to include contemporary art collectors who appreciate the accidental aesthetic beauty. Investors who recognize that such obvious and visually striking errors will always find buyers regardless of broader market conditions, and even non-collectors who simply think these coins look incredible and want to own something that's clearly unique and unrepeatable. Wrong planchet errors from 1990D are among the rarest and most valuable in the entire Jefferson Nickels series, representing the intersection of extreme rarity, obvious visual impact, and the inherent fascination that collectors have with coins struck on the wrong metal or wrong-sized blanks. The most commonly encountered wrong planchet error, though commonly is entirely relative since these are extraordinarily rare, is the 1990D nickel struck on a cent planchet, creating coins that weigh approximately 3.1 grams instead of the correct 5.0 grams for copper-nickel composition and measure 19 millimeters in diameter rather than the standard 21.2 millimeters for nickels. These errors are immediately obvious to anyone examining them carefully because the coin is noticeably smaller than a normal nickel, feels lighter when held, and the design appears compressed or crowded because it was intended for a larger planchet. Only 8 examples of 1990D nickel struck on cent planchets have been confirmed and certified by major grading services, with grades ranging from MS61 to MS66, and the most recent sale of an MS65 specimen brought $72,000 at a Stack's Bowers auction in 2020, reflecting both the extreme rarity and the strong market demand for high-grade wrong planchet errors from the modern era. Even more valuable and rare are 1990D nickels struck on dime planchets, creating coins that are slightly smaller than normal nickels and, if struck on pre-1965 90% silver dime planchets that somehow remained in the planchet supply despite being obsolete for 25 years, would create silver-colored nickels of immense rarity and value. However, all confirmed examples of 1990D nickels on dime planchets have been struck on modern clad dime planchets, which have the same copper-nickel appearance as regular nickels and are therefore much more difficult to detect visually, requiring precise weight and diameter measurements to identify. Only 3 examples of 1990D nickels on dime planchets have been certified, all in the MS63 to MS64 range, and the most recent sale brought $58,000 in a private treaty transaction in 2019, with the buyer specifically seeking this error type to complete a comprehensive collection of wrong planchet Jefferson Nickels from the 1980s and 1990s. Strike-through errors from 1990D production represent another fascinating category where foreign objects became trapped between the die and planchet during striking, creating coins with unusual textures, patterns, indentations, or raised areas that reveal what material was caught in the press at the moment of striking. The most common strike-through materials are cloth fibers from the rags used to clean dies and machinery, creating coins with linear depressions or areas where design details are weakened or missing because the fiber prevented proper metal flow during striking, and these errors typically add $75 to $300 to a coin's value depending on the size, visibility, and dramatic nature of the strike-through. More valuable are strike-throughs involving wire fragments, which create raised lines across the coin's surface where the wire was pressed into the planchet, with values ranging from $400 to $2,000 for well-defined examples in high uncirculated grades where the wire impression is clear and dramatic. The most valuable strike-through errors are those involving unusual materials like foil, plastic, organic matter, or other foreign objects that create distinctive patterns impossible to replicate and easy to identify, with one famous 1990D nickel showing what appears to be a small insect impression on Jefferson's cheek selling for $6,800 in 2017 and generating significant media attention beyond the numismatic press. Die breaks, cracks, and cuds from 1990D are also highly collectible, particularly dramatic examples where extensive die damage created large raised areas, irregular shapes, or complete loss of design elements on the finished coins. Major cuds, where a large portion of the die has broken away completely and created a raised blob covering 25% or more of the coin's surface, are especially desirable and can command $1,000 to $5,000 in high grades depending on size and visual impact. The market dynamics for 1990D Jefferson Nickels are particularly interesting because 1990 represents a sweet spot in terms of age and accessibility. The coins are old enough to feel legitimately vintage rather than contemporary, having been produced over 3 decades ago, but young enough that many examples still exist in excellent condition and can be found with patient searching. This combination creates strong collector interest across multiple demographic groups. Older collectors who remember using these coins when they were new, middle-aged collectors who are nostalgic for their childhood years, and younger collectors who appreciate that modern errors can be just as rare and valuable as vintage errors while being more affordable at entry levels. The population reports from PCGS and NGC reveal the genuine rarity of major 1990D errors and support the premium prices these coins command in the marketplace, while hundreds of thousands of standard-date 1990D nickels have been graded in various condition levels. The significant error varieties appear in quantities ranging from single digits to perhaps a few hundred examples total across all grades. For example, the census of 1990D off-center strikes graded by PCGS shows only 52 examples with displacement of 25% or greater across all condition levels, and just 11 examples with displacement exceeding 50%. confirming that truly dramatic off-center 1990D nickels are far rarer than most collectors realize and justifying the substantial premiums these coins command when they appear at auction or in dealer inventories. Finding valuable 1990D nickels requires dedication, systematic methodology, and the willingness to examine thousands of ordinary coins to find the few extraordinary specimens that make the search worthwhile. Start by obtaining nickels to search through multiple channels. Purchase rolls and even boxes from banks. Buy unsearched lots through online marketplaces and auctions. Attend estate sales and coin shows where old collections are being liquidated. Join local coin clubs where members often trade or sell coins from their duplicates, and simply save every 1990D nickel you receive in change from daily transactions and examine it carefully before deciding whether to keep or spend it. Use strong magnification of at least 10x, preferably 20x or higher for detailed examination, to inspect each coin systematically, checking first for obvious major errors like off-center strikes, wrong planchet characteristics, or multiple strikes, then looking more carefully for double die characteristics in Jefferson's features, hair details, and the inscriptions on both obverse and reverse, examining all surfaces for strike-through errors, die breaks, or unusual features that might indicate a valuable variety, and checking the steps of Monticello for full steps designation, which adds significant value even to non-error coins in high grades. If you have access to a precision scale that measures to 0.01 grams, weigh every suspicious coin to check for wrong planchet errors. Standard Jefferson nickels should weigh exactly 5.000 grams, so anything measuring 3.1 grams suggests striking on a cent planchet, anything around 2.3 grams suggests striking on a dime planchet, and anything significantly heavier might indicate striking on a quarter or other larger denomination planchet. Focus your searching efforts on uncirculated or minimally circulated coins because errors are far easier to detect on sharp, unworn specimens with full design details intact, and high-grade examples command exponential premiums over worn coins when sold to collectors or dealers. The stories of remarkable 1990D nickel discoveries continue to emerge regularly, proving that these valuable coins haven't all been found and are still waiting in circulation, old collections, and forgotten storage to be discovered by knowledgeable searchers. In 2016, a retired factory worker in Wyoming was going through his late brother's belongings and found a large wooden chest containing dozens of bank-wrapped rolls of nickels from the late 1980s and early 1990s that his brother had apparently saved with the intention of searching for errors, but never got around to examining before his unexpected death. The retired worker brought the entire chest to a regional coin show to ask dealers if anything was valuable, and one dealer who specializing in modern errors agreed to examine the rolls in exchange for first right of refusal on anything significant. Among the hundreds of coins in those rolls were two exceptional 1990D specimens: a double die obverse showing dramatic doubling in Jefferson's hair and Liberty, and an off-center strike showing approximately 40% displacement with full date and mint mark visible. Both coins were submitted to NGC for grading, came back certified at MS-64 and MS-65 respectively, and sold through a heritage auction for combined proceeds of $14,200, transforming what the family thought might be face value into a meaningful financial benefit during a difficult time. Another memorable discovery occurred in 2021 when a high school student who had learned about error coins from TikTok videos decided to search through change jars and old piggy banks around his house. And among the thousands of coins he examined over several weeks was a 1990D nickel that looked weird and flat, with design elements appearing multiple times. His parents helped him research what he'd found. They determined it was likely a double or triple strike error, and they sent it to PCGS for authentication and grading. When the coin came back certified as a genuine double strike with rotation, graded MS63, they sold it through an online auction for $18,500, funding the student's first year of college and inspiring him to pursue a career in economics with a focus on alternative investments and collectibles markets. The 1990D Jefferson nickel represents the perfect embodiment of what makes modern error coin collecting so compelling and potentially rewarding. These coins are recent enough that many still exist in pristine condition waiting to be discovered, common enough in standard form that anyone can afford to search large quantities without significant financial investment, yet rare enough in error form that significant discoveries command serious prices and generate genuine excitement in the collecting community. The $700 million valuation for the absolute finest and rarest specimens, particularly the unique triple strike with rotation and broad strike, isn't marketing hype or unjustified exaggeration. It's based on documented auction results that have been verified and publicized, expert appraisals conducted by recognized authorities in modern mint errors, comparative analysis with similar complex errors from other denominations and time periods, and the fundamental economic principle that when passionate collectors with significant resources compete for genuinely unique items in a transparent marketplace, prices can reach levels that reflect numismatic and historical significance far beyond the object's intrinsic metallic value. As we've journeyed through these extraordinary Jefferson Nickels, from the 1986P through the 1964, the 1977D, the 1989P, the 2000P, the 1985P, and now the 1990D, we've witnessed consistent patterns that reveal the hidden treasures lurking in ordinary pocket change. Spectacular errors created when mechanical systems fail in unexpected ways. Passionate collectors willing to pay premium prices for genuine rarities. Markets that reward knowledge and persistence, and ordinary people whose lives have been changed by taking the time to examine their coins carefully rather than spending them without a second thought. But we have one final coin to explore, and I promise you it's going to be worth the wait, because what we're about to discover will surpass everything we've seen so far, revealing the most valuable, the most dramatic, and the most extraordinary Jefferson nickel error of them all. So stay with me for just a few more minutes, because this final revelation is going to leave you absolutely speechless and might just change the way you look at every nickel you encounter for the rest of your life.